So let's talk about Bitcoin's future. It's really like a giant tug of war. After a year of some pretty wild swings and a lot of blown predictions, what is actually going to happen in 2026? We're going to break down the powerful forces that are pulling it in completely opposite directions. Let's get into it. To figure out where we're headed, you've got to look back at where we've been. At the end of 2024, the optimism was just off the charts, and you saw predictions like this one absolutely everywhere. But, well, as we all know now, 2025 did not play out that way. Not at all. Bitcoin did well, topping out around $126,000, but that's a world away from the massive predictions we saw plastered everywhere. Okay, so that brings us to the real question here, the whole point of this explainer. Forget all those simple price predictions for a minute. We're going to look at the underlying battle that's really going to define 2026. This powerful push of mainstream money versus the very real pull of real-world problems. All right, first up, let's look at the bull case. And it's really a story about one thing, a massive, and I mean massive, accelerating flood of traditional money that's finally really pouring into crypto. And look at this number, $50 billion. The scale we're talking about here is just mind-boggling. Analysts are expecting over $50 billion in net inflows, and that's just for U.S. spot crypto ETFs in 2026. This isn't just a bunch of retail speculation anymore. This is serious institutional capital. It's being unlocked as all these major firms are finally lifting their restrictions on. And it's not just the ETFs either. Venture capitalists, they are back in a big way. In 2025, they were pumping nearly $8 billion into U.S. crypto companies. And that's so crucial because that money is funding the next generation of infrastructure, and it shows this renewed confidence in the long-term health of the whole ecosystem. I mean, listen to this. This really paints the picture of the bigger vision that's attracting all this cash. When you have the CEO of BlackRock, only the world's largest asset manager, saying something like this, a fundamental shift is underway. This is that big promise of tokenization, where crypto tech starts to merge with traditional assets like stocks and bonds. And this is a big one. The tech itself is finally maturing to meet this moment. The Lightning Network is directly taking on one of Bitcoin's oldest criticisms, that it's just too slow and too expensive for small payments. Well, its capacity just hit an all-time high, making these super fast, super cheap transactions a reality, which makes it way more useful for everyday. And the good news doesn't stop there. We're seeing more and more public companies adding Bitcoin to their balance sheets. Tokenized real-world assets are soaring in value. And the world's biggest banks, they're finally building the secure custody solutions, the digital vaults, that are needed to bring in even more of that big institutional money. The integration is happening, for real. Okay, but it's not all smooth sailing, right? For every single one of those bullish signals, there's a serious real-world hurdle pulling in the other direction. This is the other side of that tug-of-war we were talking about. And you can't talk about hurdles without talking about El Salvador. I mean, what a historic moment when they made Bitcoin legal tender back in 2021. But the whole experiment, it basically unraveled. The government needed a massive loan, and it seems they bowed to pressure from the IMF and officially revoked Bitcoin's legal tender status. And here's the real kicker, why that matters so much. Even when adoption was literally mandated by the government, it never truly took hold. Once that initial $30 bonus was gone, almost nobody kept using a system. It's just this stark reminder that you can't just make the tech available and expect people to use it. Which, of course, brings us back to the price. Despite all that institutional momentum, there's still this massive disconnect between what the analysts are targeting and what's actually happening. As of early January 2026, Bitcoin is trading around $92,000, which, yeah, that's a healthy price, but it's less than half of what some of these major players were predicting. That volatility, it's still a huge barrier. And there's a whole bunch of other storm clouds on the horizon for 2026. The regulations are still a confusing patchwork around the world. Geopolitical tensions can flare up and send investors running from anything considered a risk asset, like Bitcoin. Even the cool new tech like the Lightning Network is facing tough questions about centralization. And hey, as El Salvador proved, the political winds can shift practically overnight. So what do you do with all this? You've got these two massive, powerful forces pulling in completely opposite directions. How do we make sense of this for the road ahead in 2026? So this really breaks it all down, doesn't it? Here's the whole conflict in one spot.
On one side, you have the immense pull of institutional money, maturing tech, and this deep integration into the financial system. But on the other, you've got the drag from failed national experiments, that crazy volatility, and the ever-present risk from regulators and politicians. This is the battle that's going to define 2026.
Look, at the end of the day, the big takeaway here isn't some magic price target. It's this framework. It's understanding the tug of war itself. If you can watch how this battle plays out and see if that mainstream integration is actually outpacing all the hurdles, you'll be in a much better position to understand the market's moves, not just react to them. And that leaves us with the big, unanswered question for 2026, doesn't it? Will the immense gravity of mainstream finance be strong enough to pull Bitcoin right into its core? Or is the friction from real-world adoption and all that risk just too strong, threatening to pull the whole project apart? The outcome is anything but certain. And honestly, that's what makes this whole